You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's show you what's on some of the front pages now. Starting with the Bristol Post, where anti-racism protesters have thronged the streets tonight to ward off a possible far-right demonstration. The headline, "They will not win." The Times says thousands of people took to the streets across the UK to confront the far right. The Guardian, too, has a similar front page. The Mail calls them the anti-hate marchers who faced down the thugs. The Telegraph shows boarded up shops as traders braced for a possible night of violence. The Metro leads with a report that online trolls are helping Vladimir Putin's efforts to destabilise the West by infiltrating chat groups that have been stirring the riots. The Eye reports that convicted rioters could also face a ban from attending football matches as police investigate possible links with soccer hooligans. The FT says that fund management company H2O has agreed to pay clients a total of €250 million after breaching Financial Conduct Authority investment rules. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Theo Usherwood and Susie Boniface. Good to see you both. Let us start with our lead story, the one story that has been happening this evening, the anti-racism protests that have been taking place across the country, passed off, as we know, as of now, without incident, completely peaceful. There have been, I think, 2 arrests we've noted, one in Bristol, and I think the other one in Plymouth, but aside from that, peaceful protests.
Yeah, it's probably, I think we were saying before we came on, Theo, that it's perhaps the first bit of good news in 5 or 6 days since the awful news of those little girls being stabbed, that has made us think that perhaps this isn't the end times and that there is a way out of it. But I would just say that as someone who, when I was a reporter, covered more than one protest and riot myself, a midweek break is not unusual. The people who are going out and causing trouble at the weekends are not people who've got the best work ethics. They don't tend to go at it every single day and have a really big plan in mind. They go out when they fancy it and when they get stoked as well from above by other people who don't want to use up all their capital with their followers early on. So I would expect we're going to see some more at the weekend, unfortunately. I don't think this is the end of it. But it is very nice to see so many thousands of people determined in the face of expecting, it should be said, a lot of violence, expecting to meet trouble, and still went out peacefully to express their view that it was not welcome in their homes and in cities right across the country. I think it's fantastic to have seen it.
I suppose, Theo, they realised and hoped that their numbers would swell and actually outnumber those with a differing opinion.
I think you're quite right to point out on that. I mean, the answer, and I mean, I completely agree with Susie. I don't think this is done, and I think there is, of course, always the danger, and I'm sure the police and intelligence services will be looking for trouble that could potentially come at the weekend. But it does. I think you're right to point out that actually it is not necessarily Keir Starmer. It's not necessarily the Crown Prosecution Service or the police that have come up with some sort of real show of force against this far-right thuggery. It is the British public that have come out and said, actually, no, we don't tolerate this. It's not something we want to have in our society. And they've done it in their thousands, from cities like Bristol, as you're reporting there, to Sheffield as well. And I think that's quite marked. And I also think that actually Starmer's managed, Keir Starmer has taken a fair share of criticism. If we're now on the downward slope in terms of these riots, he's managed to do it without having to resort to drastic measures such as calling in the army, that of course could be potentially, only fuel the flames of the far right thuggery that we've seen. So I think this is probably, if we're in this position, not least, it will give the police some respite. You know, I've been watching, I don't know about you, on social media, seeing some of these police accounts where they're starting work at 1:30 in the afternoon and finishing at 6:30 in the afternoon, 6:30 in the morning. And, you know, Dan Whitehead, your correspondent in Bristol, is on his way. Well, you know, he's not going to be there all night, is he, reporting on it, because, you know, it's all broken up fairly peacefully and people can go on their way. And that's great for Dan and everybody else in Bristol. But it's also really good news for the police, who might be able to just get an early finish and actually get to see their families, get a bit of respite before, I'm sure, you know, there may be more trouble at the weekend.
Yes, I mean, they are sort of looking ahead to that. It's certainly not over yet. Susie, I wonder what you thought of Robert Jenrick's comments, the Tory leadership contender, speaking on Sky News, saying that people shouting Allahu Akbar, which is God is great in Arabic, that's what it means, shouting that in the street should be arrested.
It's like saying that a Christian should be arrested for saying the Lord's Prayer in the street. It's about what he was talking about. And he went on Twitter, like, I think 2 hours afterwards, to try to clarify, to say it was the way they were saying it, or the fact that they're taking a peaceful word, a phrase, and sort of manipulating it in this kind of protest. There's no way out of it. He said a stupid, idiotic, ignorant thing, and it's probably done him a lot of damage, I think, in the Conservative leadership contest, because although you might think, you know, that's sort of playing to a very right-wing base, actually he's got to get the approval, as Theo was explaining to me before we came on, he's got to get the approval of the Conservative MPs before the leadership contenders can go to the party, to the membership, and that those MPs who know damn well that's not the kind of thing you say or even think or know, don't want to have that kind of a figure as their leader. So they're not going to present those kind of alternatives to the membership for a vote. So I think he's done himself, I think he may well have done himself in, actually, to be honest. I think his leadership hopes are probably gone on the basis of that.
Would you agree with that, Theo?
Yes, I mean,
the Muslim Council of Britain was saying it was Islamophobic.
It's just stupid, isn't it? It's just a ridiculous thing to say, apart from anything else. You know, if you want to make a criticism, right, of the way the police handled those protests that we've seen in up and down cities, up and down the country since October the 7th, there is room to make that criticism, because there was criticism at the time, particularly from the Jewish community, about the way those protests were handled. But, you know, as Susie said, it's like saying the Lord's Prayer. It's God is great. It's just a statement. It's not particularly inflammatory. It's not designed to intimidate, and it was a silly, a stupid thing to say. And just, I think, you know, Conservative MPs, you know, if these protests have done anything, if they've had a knock-on impact on the Conservative leadership race, and I know, quite rightly, most of us aren't focused on it at all, the leadership race, it's actually made Tory MPs really think, you know, is this the direction we go down with Nigel Farage, you know, always trying to pull us to the right? And I think most have woken up, maybe not all, but most have woken up to the fact that that's a dead-end cul-de-sac, and actually that if the Conservative Party is going to be a force, I think, you know, they're starting to recognise that, you know, there may potentially be a shelf life to Reform UK and to Nigel Farage as a major force in UK politics. And I think actually that the way to go is towards the Liberal, you know, trying to win back those seats from the Liberal Democrats, particularly trying to win back those seats that they lost to Labour at the last election, and that's not going to be a fairly fruitful direction for the Conservative Party should they decide to pick a leader who wants to make those kind of comments and pander to those kind of sympathies.
I don't know. I can imagine if Boris Johnson said something like that it would kind of get brushed aside, or he'd be able to carry it off because of his charisma. Whereas someone like Robert Jenrick, I think the reason that it doesn't land so well is because he lacks.
I think, it's also, isn't it? And maybe this is just a personal opinion. I think it's a sort of trick you can only pull off once. And I think now where we find ourselves, we've seen where it leads. We've seen like where letterbox comments leads. Of course, Boris Johnson made that about the hijab in that column. These are the results of it, right? I mean, he's not entirely to blame. The people who committed the violence, they're the ones to blame for what we've seen. But actually, you know, the Conservative MPs outside of the leadership contest are being, you know, conspicuously quiet, aren't they? Because, you know, this is, you know, Keir Starmer. You can criticise his response, you can criticise the response of Yvette Cooper, but where we find ourselves today comes off the back of 14 years of a Conservative-led government, and then, of course, and a Brexit referendum, and then 4 weeks of a Labour government, to be fair to Keir Starmer. So if you want to apportion blame and you want to say that there's this big uprising and people are really unhappy and there's loads of resentment, you want to make that argument, well, to be fair to Keir Starmer and to the Labour Party, they weren't in charge during that time when that resentment supposedly built up.
And many saying that the thugs that we've seen rioting on the streets, they've adopted the slogans of the previous Conservative government. You know, their placards were saying, stop the boats.
Yeah.
So the context in which Robert Jenrick made the comments...
I think makes their silence, especially as so many people in the shadow cabinet now, Rishi Sunak included, but underneath him as well, were in the last government, and they stood next to that slogan on podiums. They had it on their election leaflets. They had it when they said it when they went on to media appearances. And their failure to stand up to the riots that we've seen and the way that slogan has been used, for them not to have come out and said, that isn't what we meant, it's gone wrong, no, we're not part of this. Their failure to do that, I think, just shows their moral cowardice, and it is... I'm ashamed of them. I'm ashamed.
That is an interesting point, actually. They haven't even said that, you know, their slogan has been hijacked. There's just been silence. The Guardian, similar front page to the Times. That picture of the protesters out on the streets in full force. We thought probably, well, in the thousands, I definitely would say that particular crowd. The Daily Mail, their headline, Night anti-hate marchers face down the thugs. Theo.
Yeah, it's an interesting, you know, the Mail of, you know, I think it's a very powerful front page, in fact, you know, pointing out the fact that shop owners have had to board up their properties, board up their shops and you know, businesses. Far-right protests thwarted the Mail reports and shows the picture of people waving placards in Walthamstow. Funnily enough, I don't think the Daily Mail particularly sells many copies in Walthamstow, but it's a powerful front page from the Daily Mail, and I think actually it's you know, fair play, chapeau to them. I think it's a good front page, and I think it sends the Daily Mail is sending the right message to its readership, because I think there's often, it's very easy to say, you know, for newspapers. And you could just fall into that trap, can't you, of saying, well, there must be a reason, we need to examine the reason. And then you find yourself, and Keir Starmer was very cautious not to allow this to happen, you find yourself, of course, potentially justifying it because you're saying there's some underlying reason that we all need to examine about why we find ourselves in this particular situation. But right now, actually, I think it's a very powerful and timely front-page story.
Susie, there isn't really any other headline they could write this evening, is there?
They couldn't do anything else. It's a good image. There will be more powerful images that they've chosen not to use, which I suspect they would have done because they didn't want to change the front-page tone that much. I think most of the people in this image probably, if they knew their picture was going to be in the front of the Daily Mail, they're probably quite cross about it. But, I mean, the Mail recently is Britain's biggest read newspaper. It's got the widest readership. What it does matters on its front page. And I worked there for 2 years and learnt an awful lot there. But in recent years, it's sort of had the same problem as the Conservative Party, with a narrowing kind of core following. And that has made it more and more sort of moving to the extremes to try to meet that following's need, as opposed to actually doing the job that it did do perhaps a few years ago, which was just to be the biggest read newspaper in the country and to be a paper of record as such. And I've been quite disappointed recently in the way that it's gone. But I think this is, as Theo says, hat off to them. They've done the right story, as it were.
Theo, to the eye, and we read that the far-right rioters could face football bans, possibly an area that would really hit them hard.
We were just speaking to Graham off air about this, so we've done quite a lot of research about this. Who was saying,
I spoke to Graham about this as well.
You know, this is do any of these people go to football matches? Do any of these thugs go to football matches? Probably not. But I think, you know, within the scope of what Number 10 and the government is trying to do, is to try and use tried and tested methods from before to create this idea of a deterrent so that people don't go out and commit this thuggery, rather than, of course, resort to... And it was, you know, I think you know, there was sort of mixed signals that people in government were starting to get quite nervous and jittery over over the last weekend about whether actually they were going to have to resort to more severe tactics to stop this from happening. But a football banning order just fits into, or the use of football banning orders fits into, if you know, I hate the term, it's sort of, you know, Whitehall jargon, the toolkit of what is available to judges and to courts to issue. I think perhaps the more interesting line to come out in the last 24 hours is this idea, the real deterrent is this idea of using, you know, calling it terrorism and bringing terrorist charges against particular individuals where significant amounts of violence is used. And I think that's the next level up. And I think that will be, you know, if all of these front pages of, you know, it's a false dawn and actually we're going to see much more violence in the weeks ahead, that's where it will go, and that actually football banning orders just aren't going to necessarily be the deterrent that ministers might wish them to be.
OK, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Theo and Susie, let's take a break. Coming up, why did Kamala Harris pick Tim Walz to be her running mate? We'll have insights from the Times when we come back. Do stay with us.
It's a phenomenal sculpture from the Japanese artist Yao Kusama, one of the most internationally renowned artists in the world. And it's her first permanent artwork in the UK, here in London. So the piece is a series of 4 incredible arches that have this rhythmic serpentine twisting kind of form to them, right outside of the Elizabeth Line station, the new exit here at Liverpool Street. And it's part of the Crossrail Art Programme. So it was a programme of doing huge artworks along the central London section of the Elizabeth Line. And today, this is the final work that's being unveiled. It's a really incredible, engaging work from an incredible artist. I really think this one is stopping in tracks for people. There's been a lot of people wanting to take selfies with it. It's incredibly reflective. It's a beautiful work, super reflective like a mirror, which creates these amazing shadows around it. You can see yourself in it, but you can also see, you know, the buildings around it. I think Kusama's been really popular in many ways. She's a really well-respected artist, but her mirror rooms, for example, you'll find them all over Instagram. People love engaging with this kind of work, and they're so huge. You can walk underneath them. You can really engage with them. And I think, you know, a great city like London really deserves to have the best public art in the world. And I think this is an example of that. Well, this work, in fact, was from the Crossrail Art Foundation. So this was specially set up for the Elizabeth Line as a sort of once-in-a-generation opportunity, which means TfL, there's no public funding towards this work. It was co-funded by City of London Corporation and British Land. So it's a really interesting example of bringing in private money to make great public work. But of course, I also think it's really important that we have that mix of public funds and private funds that come together to make our cities incredible. It's what great cities are all about. But this work, 0 to TfL.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Theo Usherwood and Susie Boniface. We're going to take a look at the Times World section and what's going on across the pond. Harris Waltz ticket officially launched last night to great fanfare. I've never seen so much energy in one place. Kamala Harris took about 30 minutes in her run-up, her intro to Tim Walz, and he gave a blinding performance, I thought, very confident.
Yeah, he's a very impressive man, Tim Walz, and his backstory is fascinating. He got into politics because he was a school teacher. A school geography teacher. He took some of his students to a rally when George Bush was coming up for election, because he wanted just for politics class. And when they got to the gate, the security guard stopped one of his students because his student had a John Kerry sticker for the Democrat opponent, on his wallet. And the security guard stopped him and said, well, we don't know if you're safe to come in. And this was a bit, war on terror era and everything else. But he said, we can't trust you. And so then Tim Walz stepped forward and said, it's all right, he's with me. Here I am, I'm teacher of the year, this is me, I've got my ID for the school, he's just coming into politics class, he's not going to... And then the guy on the gate said, well, now we don't know if you're safe, so you can't come in. At which point, there was a bit of a fight and a ruckus, and he kind of came away and went, this is incredible. He went and volunteered for the Kerry campaign and then got involved in politics. And his first election was run by basically his high school students who said, yeah, Mr. Waltz is going to run. Brilliant, let's go and do it. So, I mean, he's a fascinating guy, and he is a really good pick because he's a counter for all the things people want to criticise about Kamala Harris. He's male, she's female, he's white, she's black. He's a dad, she's a stepmother and doesn't have children of her own, cat lady kind of thing. And everything that, she's from a Democrat state, it's more about liberalism. He's a gun-owning Minnesota, Midwestern dad. He counters a lot of the stuff people might criticise her for. And he's got a real problem with J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, and his sort of hillbilly background. He says, well, I don't know any hillbillies who are venture capitalists and went to Yale. What is this guy talking about? And he's really plain speaking. He kind of connects to people quite well. So the one thing that's going to count against him, perhaps, is that when he was governor of Minnesota when George Floyd was killed, and it took him a while to send in the National Guard. And so the attack ads from Trump are going to be Minnesota on fire, Minneapolis burning, while Tim Walz did nothing for a bit. I suspect there's going to be some attacks for indecision and stuff to do with that. I don't think it's going to matter. I think he and Kamala are going to walk it.
And Theo, do you think she's taken a bit of a gamble on him? Because all eyes were on Josh Shapiro. And the thought that he would be the running mate.
Josie Ennis's report in the Times is fascinating. I'd never heard of this phrase, murder boarding, where Kamala Harris had got her brother-in-law, Tony West, together with the Biden administration's former Labour Secretary, Marty Walsh, to basically go through the 6 finalists and to basically present them with various doomsday scenarios to test their readiness for the highest office in America. And obviously, Josh Shapiro didn't pass that murder boarding test as perhaps as well as Waltz. And it included a quiz on, dirty laundry, college antics, previous relationships and past political opinions. But I think to the headline, I think the most important quote is, why has, it's the point you're making, why has Kamala Harris gone for this, a white man, and it's, and the quote is a source close to NBC News saying there's a lot of racist white dudes out there in America who don't like Trump but just need a little extra validation. They needed someone who gives moderate Republican voters a place to go, and I think that's, if you think back to what Obama did when he appointed Biden as his running mate for VP, whenever you have these. When you're trying to pick someone to run against, to run with you, you need to pick somebody who actually wins a caucus of voters that you don't necessarily appeal to. Donald Trump did it with Mike Pence. All of the comments about his, all of his comments that were so appalling, Mike Pence won over the Bible Belt. But this time around, and this is why I think Vance is a mispick, and he's going to live to regret it, is that actually Trump's gone for his heir apparent rather than trying to pick somebody who offers something more to the campaign than he would otherwise have. And I think that's why, I think we're now starting to see, well, it's not the only reason, but But I think actually it's a game on in terms of this contest, whereas actually a few weeks ago after that assassination attempt, it felt like it was just going to be a coronation for Trump.
We must leave it there.
Sorry.
Theo and Susie, don't be sorry, you're here to talk. Thanks very much.